Hey, it's Mazzy. Let's talk about some wonderful new music, some new records, reissues for the most part, but just some really great music. That's what you want to hear, right? Good music. Yeah. It's Mazzy. So it's like I'm starting all over after that 1,000 video extravaganza. I had to take a little moment of reflection, a little break for about 4 days, 4 or 5 days. I'm back. This week I have a interesting video. I think it's coming out on Monday, that James Griffith out of the UK came to me with a concept, and it's just a conversation. What if the Beatles didn't exist, had never existed? What if? We had a great conversation. It'll be up Monday. Interesting how that goes. Also, on later in this week, now we're talking, depending when you're watching this is November. What is it? November, mid-November, early November, sometime in November in 2022. So in a few weeks is Record Store Day, Black Friday Record Store Day, and I am having a discussion with Zev Feldman, who had Resonance Records, who is the jazz detective, and he has these two Ahmad Jamal limited edition, 5,000 copies each, both double albums, vintage recordings, 65, 66, 64, 65, 63, 64, recorded at the Penthouse, the infamous jazz club in Seattle, way before my time. Double albums, books. I have not listened to these. Are they embargoed yet? I'll listen to them before I have a discussion with Zev. And Zev puts out these archival releases. He's done some Bill Evans and a lot of interesting stuff. Some out there, some very accessible, some wonderful recordings, some more vintage archival, and hopefully that'll be up by Thursday. So depending when you're watching this, I don't usually like to do videos announcing something because you never know when you're going to come across this video. So that's not my style or my scene, man. This is a record I got turned on to by Michael, Poetry and Plastic. I'll put a link below to his YouTube channel too. Classical oboist into Japanese pop music, obviously classical, and so many others. Really wonderful gentleman. And he mentioned this briefly, and for some reason, I bought a copy a few months ago, and I put it in a filing system that's not my usual filing system, and it disappeared, and I forgot that I had it, but it turned out to be sort of a gray market release. So he reaches out to me a couple weeks ago and says, oh, this record is coming out, Kevin Gray cut, Stoughton Jackets. I have no idea what label this is, but it's a Japanese pop group, recorded an album in 1968. They're called the Jacks. The record is Vacant World. See, there's a hype sticker. Kevin Gray cut this. Stoughton Jacket. You don't need it. You want to see this record. What an amazing, beautiful cover. Beatlesque. Now remember, 1966, the Beatles played Budokan in Tokyo. A lot of young people were influenced. Of course, the Jacks started out as a folk band. This sort of Western pop scene has happened as a result of folk music, and the Beatles, that was more Western style of music. Now this record, I blasted this last night. This is a fantastic sounding record, and it's basically psychedelic garage rock. It starts out a little slow and it builds up. It's poppy to a point, but not overly poppy. In that 68 period of Steppenwolf fuzz guitars, and not that they sound like Steppenwolf, but they're in that vein of in 68, getting away from the young poppy stuff of pop bands like the Beatles into Revolver, of course, influenced by that, and Sgt. Pepper and beyond. Japanese here. It has a nice little insert here. And in English, it tells the story. And if you speak Japanese, it tells the story for you as well. So it's a fantastic album, The Jacks. It's got a mood to it, but it's really, really well recorded. And considering, I mean, I think Kevin Gray did a master full job. I don't know what the originals sound like. Apparently the original has been in demand for a long time. This has gained stature over the years. Beatlesque, but not Beatlesque. Very original, very original. But of that, 60s psychedelic, dirge, drone at times, but also very sung in Japanese, and a really wonderful, wonderful record. Now, I recently did It's the Music Stupid video where I did pull an album by World Party, the Carl Wallinger band project. Carl came from the Waterboys and did a series of albums under the name World Party. It's really it's him. Other artists he brings in sometimes he plays everything. And I said in that video, this guy is friggin' amazing. I mean, he can sound like the Beatles, he can sound like the Stones, he can sound like Dylan, he could do some sort of 60s and 70s funky R&B, beautifully recording, great singer, and he does it well, but he makes it his. And there are familiarities of those artists, but he makes it his. And this is Egyptology, which is amongst my favorites, just came out, reissued. All these records have been reissued by World Party. I think they're all out now. I could be wrong. 4 or 5 records, one's an EP. And what's great about this, obviously, this came out during the CD era in 1997. And this side 4 has a live set, partial set. Very catchy stuff. My favorite song on here is called Vanity Fair. And you just got to hear it to feel it. This whole reissue program, World Party, we'll see what comes next. This is this Impulse series that's come out in collaboration with Third Man, Jack White's label and pressing plant. These are put out by Verve NME. It's a different Verve series than the Acoustic Sounds Verve series that's all analog. Stoughton covers all this. Some people complain about the cover. It's an adequate cover. We're spoiled by these Stout and these other things, but I think it's fine. You got your 1970 phallic-ish cover art. 1970, this album was Alice Coltrane, of course. Artist in her own right, great piano player, one of the only few jazz harpists, and obviously kind of one of the originators of not really soul jazz, but spiritual jazz. I had never heard this record, but the lineup on this is stunning. It's got left and right channels. They separated of Pharoah Sanders on tenor sax, alto flute, and bells, and Joe Henderson on tenor sax and alto flute. And in the liner notes, Alice talks about how one is more disciplined as a reed instrument player, and one's more out there in improvisational or more out there. I'll say it again. And they kind of really balance nicely with each other. Alice's piano playing, side 1 is her piano playing. It's so beautiful. The recording is so well done. This is probably from a digital tape too, and it sounds friggin' fantastic. This is one of the best jazz albums right now I have sound-wise that's come out recently. I mean, I love the Tone Poets. Those sound amazing. You expect them to. But this was a surprise for me how good it sounded. And the recording the piano, and especially Ron Carter's bass playing on this. Oh my God, it's gorgeous. Side 2, she gets more into the harp as piano too, but she plays a harp more on side 2 than on side 1. And on drums, we have Ben Riley here. But what really struck me on side 1 here, if you know the first couple of 2 or 3 or 4 Tom Waits albums on Asylum Records, Nighthawks at the Diner and that period, his bluesy, jazzy, loungy piano player, I could totally see and have a vision of Tom Waits listening to this album and being very influenced. Obviously doesn't copy it, but as a piano player, as a sort of a jazz artist, great pianist. A couple of the more bluesy numbers on side 1 reminded me of, it was actually only 2 songs on side 1. There's only 4 songs on the whole album. But it reminded me of the style of Tom Waits plays on those first couple albums, Nighthawks and Heart of the Saturday Night, those records, which I just adore. I adore those records. So this is a wonderful record. I think it's very accessible. Side 2 has a little, gets a little more out there at times, more free jazz, but not that much. Really well recorded, essential record in jazz, spiritual jazz, but it's got the more blues bass, so it is grounded in blues-based jazz, and then it kind of gets freer as it goes along. But fantastic record, Alice Coltrane, from 1970, featuring Pharoah Sanders and Joe Henderson. But again, the Ron Carter bass playing is something really, really special on this record. So when I make these videos, I don't usually take a break. I kind of go straight through, and then maybe I cut out the extra stuff or when I repeat myself. But I need to take a break now. So I just made myself a macchiato. And for those of you who aren't coffee drinkers or know the finer, the various espresso coffee drinks, it's not one of those things like you'd get a double mocha with a half-calf decaf and a spritzer of this with foam and cinnamon sticks and all that crap you see at Starbucks and other places. But macchiato is essentially a shot of espresso. So you have you put your finger out like that. It's a shot of espresso, and you put a dollop of milk in it, or foam, really. It's foam on top, milk drips in. And that's a macchiato. There's no caramel shit in it. There's no flavoring in it. There's no Torani flavored sodas in it. And this is a macchiato. You just gotta have the right pull, espresso pull, so it's not bitter, but so good. This is good. I used to have these like every afternoon. I don't do it very often as I get older. I don't do coffee much in the afternoon, but been working like a dog. That could be a song. All day today, work-wise, and working on this video, or at least showing records, playing music. And so I thought I'd make just a little mid-afternoon, little Sunday afternoon macchiato. You don't have to put your finger like that. Just indulge me, have fun. Everyone gets so serious, Jesus. Just stand at a coffee bar and there'll be more music, just chill. Okay. Now what do you want to see and hear about? Okay, I'm going to end this with a little update of an album I ordered, and I showed 2 of these albums briefly recently in my last mix video, because going back to, I had the honor to speak with Tone Poet himself, Joe Harley, on that video. Check it out. It's a week ago or so. And I wanted him to show some of his favorite records. And he turned me on to Jimmy Giuffre, who I had heard the name, but I didn't know anything about him. And I showed this already. This is the ECM record from 1961. Actually, it was for Verve Records in 1961 that Creed Taylor produced for Verve. And 2 records of that year that Jimmy Giuffre Trio put out that ECM reissued in 1992. Fantastic. I think I've heard a bunch of people saw that video, been ordering this, so I don't know if it's hard to get now, but it is so beautiful and really, really interesting. But I did show briefly this. This is Charlie Hayden, Paul Motion, and Jerry Allen, featuring Jerry Allen, great piano player, Paul Motion, drummer, and Charlie Hayden, great, amazing bass player. I love this record, and I did briefly show this. It's so beautiful, but this one arrived that Joe Harley also showed, and it hadn't arrived before that video. And one of the records he showed was Jerry Allen, the same lineup virtually. And this was a disc distributed by Disc Union. This is a Japanese press, because it has Obi. Fantastic record. It's got a great mood to it. Now, there's 2 Charlie Parker covers on here that bring a little more boppy, but but so beautifully recorded. Charlie's bass is smooth, it's wonderful. I love Charlie Hayden because he's very unique, and he can go from the wilder stuff to the really melodic stuff. And Jerry Allen is one of these piano players that has a melody to her. And sometimes reminds me a little bit of Bill Evans, but then she gets into this other whole kind of arrangement or style that is just really wonderful. Revolving. So many words you can use to identify this stuff. And of course, Paul Motion. Someone on that last video, I wasn't sure about Paul Motion's pronunciation. Now, apparently, is he Armenian, as I recall? It was originally Paul Modian, but because people started calling him Motion, he adopted the name Motion. So we're all right, whether we say Motion or Modian, but most people, in America and most of us refer to it as Paul Motion. But he even used Paul Motion, even though it's Modian. I digress, but beautiful music anyway. Again, it ends with a really smooth, wonderful, beautiful original called Rain by Jerry Allen. It's got, let's see, one Paul Motion track, opens up with Law Years, original by Ornette Coleman. And again, those two tracks by Marmaduke and Segment, the great Charlie Parker tracks, and really, really wonderful. I'm not a huge fan of this cover art, but it's music, right? I love the music. So that's it, a short one of just some records that are on my turntable. And, I will say one thing. Going back, we're all in Revolver now, Beatles Revolver. I've been listening to it a lot more. I had friends over last night and I played the stereo new mix. They friggin' loved it. Now, they didn't know the difference of an old mix, new mix. They're friends that like music, but they don't know stereo mono. They don't give a crap, really. And we blasted that in this house here, in this live room. And it sounded so good. And they were thinking, God, this really sounds great. I forgot how great this record sounds. I haven't heard this record in forever. So these are non-vinyl people for the most part, listening to great music. And so there is an audience for these remixes. And I'm warming up to this, to remix. Of course, I still like the original stereo left-to-right pans. But I think Giles Martin did really a wonderful, considering all this hoops they jumped through to get that Beatles, centered vocal thing with that updated software by Peter Jackson. I think they were very successful. So watch the other videos coming this week. Thank you. Please subscribe. That helps. It helps the world. It helps me and the world. I really appreciate it. Click like. Take care. Mazzy loves you. I used to play the saxophone.